If you're an old school League of Legends player who's been playing since the early days, you probably feel really nostalgic looking at the gameplay in the background. However, if you're a newer League of Legends player, you probably feel more confused than anything. If you compare old League of Legends to current League of Legends, just from a visual perspective, it's crazy to see how much the game has actually changed. The map, the champions, the artworks, the jungle camps, and even the minions. It honestly doesn't look like the same game. In fact, if you're a newer player, you maybe didn't even recognize the game as League of Legends. What you're looking at is League of Legends gameplay from 2009, 15 years ago, when the game's community was just a fraction of what it is today. The early days of League of Legends can only be described as chaos, a massive mess. The game was full of bugs and glitches. Some were minor, such as movement glitches, which still happen today sometimes. Others were legit game breaking, like Alistar heal having no cooldown. Champions were also completely overloaded. Some champions like Twisted Fate and Jax were so overloaded that they are still talked about to this day. On top of that, the visuals were considered below average, even for 2009 standards. In fact, the champion icons were not made in Photoshop, they were in fact made in MS Paint. I actually wonder if they intended to give him glasses on his original in-game model. Now, in Riot's defense, they were an extremely small company when they started working on League of Legends. League of Legends also happened to be their first game. In fact, Riot Games was founded just for League of Legends alone. It was founded by a small handful of dedicated Dota fans that wanted to create their own version of the game. While they lacked game design experience and had a rather small budget, they had a strategy.
Why should people choose to move on from Dota to League of Legends?
Well, I think the big thing, that's actually a great question. Well, the first thing I can say, rather than talking about how I think the game is awesome or something like that, is actually put it in front of the consumer. Our game's free. We are allowing you to download the client and play for free, and you can play the whole gaming experience from start to finish without spending any money on it whatsoever. What we're doing for monetization is allowing you to buy custom champions, bonuses that you can use in different scenarios and whatnot. But like I said, first and foremost, the game is free.
The game was free to play, which at the time was rather unique. Back then, free-to-play games on PC were mostly mini-games or party games on sites such as Miniclip. While these games themselves weren't bad or anything, they would get boring pretty quickly, as they had no real depth to them. They weren't meant to be played for hours on end. However, League was different. It was an actual full-fledged free-to-play game. If you were a kid, you didn't have to ask your parents to buy you the game. If you were an adult, you didn't risk wasting money on a game you perhaps wouldn't end up liking. The game was flawed, but it was free. So it would gather a decent community, especially among Dota fans. In fact, pretty much all of the early League of Legends professional players would come from Dota. With the start of League of Legends' first ranked season on July 13, 2010 right around the corner, Riot would soon work on fixing the biggest flaws within the game. They would fix a lot of bugs and glitches that were present at the time. They would also significantly tweak the power of their champion roster. And they would redesign their champion splash arts. This time, thankfully, not in paint. However, going into Season 1 they still had one massive problem that they struggled to find a solution for. Balancing. In the present day, people complain all the time about balancing issues. People complain about how broken support is.
I mean, I'm unironically getting farmed by their support Fiora.
People complain how the jungle has been dominated by AP junglers for a while.
Oh my god, that's many. What the going on?
That's a lot of plants.
What is going on with the plants? Alright.
So, what about the early days? What did players complain about? What was the meta? To be honest, back then, there was no real meta. Apart from certain champions being extremely strong, like the mentioned Twisted Fate and Jax, people didn't really know how the game was supposed to be played. In fact, roles didn't actually exist yet. We all know that today we have clear roles for all 5 players to fulfill. But back then, it was just chaos. Everyone went anywhere and farmed. If you were high elo, usually someone would jungle, but the rest was a complete mess. North America would end up with an interesting lineup of one top laner, which either consisted of an AP carry or AD carry, one jungler, one mid laner, which also consisted of either an AP or AD carry depending on who you sent top lane, and 2 bot laners, usually consisting of some sort of frontliner and support. Now it is worth noting that jungling back then was quite a challenge. Today, pretty much every champion can clear jungle camps. Some YouTubers even make A to Z challenges playing every champion in the jungle. However, back then, only a select few could actually clear the jungle. Warwick, Lee Sin, Shaco, Amumu were probably the most known ones. If you tried to jungle as Karthus back then, you wouldn't make it past 2 camps. Now all of this stayed that way for a while. North America and Europe would have their separate solutions to the chaos, with their own role assignments. That was until the Season 1 World Championship. The Season 1 World Championship would last only 2 days, from June 18th to June 20th, 2011. It took place at DreamHack in Sweden with a prize pool of only $100,000 and only 200 available seats, which is nothing like the League of Legends World Championships we have these days. However, to Riot back then, it was still a massive success, as over 200,000 people would tune in to watch the tournament over its 2 days. With that, not only did Riot confirm that there in fact was a demand for more esports content, however they also finally found a solution to their balancing problem, as it would be evident that Europe's strategy was superior, leading to North America adopting it over the following months. Europe would play one top laner, usually a frontliner, one jungler, one mid laner, usually a mage, and 2 bot laners, consisting of an AD carry and a healing support, which is pretty much the same we have today. On top of that, this tournament also showed how broken healing and sustain in general was. It might not look like much, but this was a massive step for the game's balancing. These days, it's pretty easy to notice if something breaks the game. It doesn't take an expert to tell that AP junglers are taking over the jungle right now. We notice it instantly because we can compare AP junglers to other junglers. But back then, the only thing Riot could balance were individual characters and systems that were not role or class specific, because well, roles and classes didn't exist. It's much easier to compare champions within their roles and classes to each other and decide if changes are needed or not than it is to compare one character to the whole roster. Following the Season 1 World Championship, League would soon enter its second ranked season in 2012, Season 2. Riot would take this chance to nerf healing across the board, and also adjust other systems. While this was well received by players at the time, they would soon have more to worry about than balancing, as the game would see its biggest growth so far. In June 2012, League of Legends would officially become the most played PC game in the world, beating its competition by quite a long shot. In fact, the Season 2 World Championship would be the biggest esports event of its time. With a $2 million prize pool, the differences between the 2 tournaments is just crazy, especially when you consider that all of this growth happened in just a year. Like with everything that succeeds, it's hard to exactly pinpoint why and how it succeeded. While League of Legends had competition in the MOBA genre, most notably the then highly praised Heroes of New Earth, it had little to no competition among free-to-play games. League of Legends would become the free-to-play game for everyone who wanted to play a fun game at any time. If you wanted to play a game with your friends without having to worry if everyone owns a copy, League of Legends was your best choice. If you were looking to kill some time or you were looking for a fun new online game, League of Legends was free, so why not give it a shot? The free-to-play system was simply so appealing to so many people. This immediately spawned a lot of competition. More competition in the MOBA genre, but especially competition in the free-to-play genre, as more companies would realize the potential of making their games free-to-play. But that's fine, since League of Legends was already at the top. As we just saw, the gap between League and its competition was quite big, so Riot had nothing to worry about? Well, no. History proves otherwise. When your game blows up, the demand for more content is higher than ever before. This isn't just about new content like new additions to the game, but also about present flaws that affect the game negatively. This, of course, doesn't just apply to gaming, this applies to any brand that suddenly gains a lot of attraction. Riot obviously knew what they were doing from a business standpoint up until then. But only time could tell if Riot also knew how to capitalize on League of Legends' success. As mentioned earlier, League of Legends was very flawed on its release, which is a common theme with games before they blow up, because well, before blowing up there is usually a lack of budget and experience. Unless it's a game from an already big company, but games that get newly released from big companies also have way higher expectations from the community. Now, fulfilling the higher player demand doesn't sound too difficult on paper. You can technically just listen to player feedback, make changes based on that, and you're headed in the right direction. Players complain about server issues, players want more maps, you know what to work on next to be praised on Reddit. However, this immediately poses the next challenge. Was your game even built for success? Let's take a more recent example. Among Us. A game that completely blew up in 2020 in every way possible. It was all over the internet. There was only one problem. The game was not built for its massive success at all. Immediately, the game suffered from server problems, which, to be fair, didn't take them too long to fix. However, the main thing that the players wanted was new maps. But the game was so poorly built that it simply wasn't possible, at least not in a reasonable time. While this is pretty bad for a game's hype, people are actually willing to wait for a surprisingly long time. What's way worse is waiting for a long time just to be disappointed. The best recent example of this has to be Overwatch 2. The first Overwatch game was pretty much left in the dust for a long time. However, when in 2019 Blizzard announced the promising Overwatch 2, people didn't mind waiting as much. They were excited for the new game, especially for the promised PvE mode. But they were let down. Big time. As after waiting for several years, the game had its new heroes locked behind battle passes, and worst of all, the promised PvE mode was cancelled. So how did Riot approach these challenges as League blew up in 2012? It's pretty clear that their focus that year was mainly on one thing: the visuals. As mentioned earlier, League's visuals were always considered below average, mainly due to their lack of budget. But with their game growing massively, they would start giving their champions visual updates and new splash arts, which was extremely well received by the community at the time. They would also update their Summoner's Rift map visually for the first time. Now, while improved visuals may not seem like much, this was already a good move by Riot, as good visuals are a massive factor for a game that's becoming mainstream. However, as mentioned earlier, it's not just about new content, it's also about fixing the present flaws within the game. And one big flaw that players were complaining about for a while was how Riot tended to overnerf everything. Balance-wise, the game did a full 180 compared to its beta days. The meta was very slow and stale. And on top of that, itemization was very one-dimensional and not flexible at all. For example, everyone bought boots and 3 potions as their starting item, and gold generation items were standard in most builds. Supports were just ward bots with no real items, and junglers were basically the second support. With League of Legends' 3rd ranked season in 2013 right around the corner, it was clear that Riot knew partly what they were doing with their changes to the game's visuals and balancing attempts. So all eyes were on Riot for Season 3, and their ability to keep League of Legends on the top. These days, every preseason is like Christmas. Riot is expected to have big fresh changes to the game every year, such as the massive terrain changes this year, or the Mythic item update in 2021. So it might surprise you that preseason 1 and 2 were pretty much just like any other patch. Just another list of balance changes and maybe a new addition just like any other time of the year. However, on December 4th, 2012, the Preseason 3 patch would arrive along with an 11-minute patch overview video on the Riot Games YouTube channel. This patch would be the biggest patch that League of Legends has seen in 3.5 years, ever since its release in October 2009. At that time, everyone who loaded into a game unaware of the patch was in complete shock. Everything changed in some way or another. But what did Riot actually change? First of all, it was clear that they wanted to fix their stale itemization problem. To start off, they increased base movement speed of every champion while nerfing boots at the same time. Finally, you could start something other than boots and 3 pots. However, Riot wasn't done with improving items yet, far from it, as Riot added 22 new items and reworked 22. While every class benefited from the new items, it's junglers who clearly benefited the most. As mentioned, junglers in Season 2 were basically the second support. Unless you were a jungler with an extremely strong early game like Lee Sin or Shaco, junglers were made up of tanks or fighters itemized extremely tanky, which made the role not appealing for most players. So what did Riot do? Junglers got specific upgrades for their jungle item. You were an early game AD jungler? You could go Spirit of the Elder Lizard and snowball hard with its high attack damage and burn effect. You were an AP jungler? Spirit of the Spectral Wave would grant you ability power and spell healing. And if you were a tank jungler, Spirit of the Ancient Golem would give you health and reduce crowd control effects. This really increased jungle diversity and gave junglers way more agency in the game. AP junglers were finally viable. Junglers weren't a second support anymore. Speaking of supports, the most depressing role to play up until that point was easily support. In Seasons 1 and 2, supports would rush gold generation items and then spend all their income until the game ended on wards. Back then there was no ward limit and trinkets did not exist, so supports would be responsible for 90% of the vision on the map. So what was Riot's solution? Sightstone. If I had to choose a winner for the best item added this patch, it would have been Sightstone. This item would give you free wards every time you visit the shop, with the catch being that you could only place 3 wards at a time. However, this was still game changing. Finally, you could aim at building proper items as support, which also happened to be added by Riot that same patch. You were no longer obligated to spend all your money on wards. It weren't just junglers and supports though. Every class got more diverse and got new content. Tanks could tank more with the new 1000 HP war mods. Control mages would be less squishy with the new Leandries and Seraph's Embrace. AD carries didn't have to stack Phantom Dancers anymore, as Riot finally added more attack speed item options. AD carries will also gain more protection from burst with the new summoner spell Barrier, which they would need. as AP assassins would get a lot more burst from the changed Lichbane, and AD assassins with the new Black Cleaver and Blade of the Ruin King. Now, if you think that's all, you're wrong. They also changed runes, reworked the whole mastery system, adjusted summoner spells, the HUD interface, oh, and they added Nami. Initially, reactions were really mixed. Some were really happy with the changes and applauded Riot. Others were really skeptical, not knowing if the game is headed in the right direction, and some flat out hated them and said League is dying. In the end, the changes turned out to be a massive success. People had fun. Despite some things being broken on release, especially Black Cleaver, people were happy for the most part. They knew that giving every class and role fun new items and generally increasing player satisfaction across every role would be a massive success. And they were right. People loved it. Experimenting with new items was fun, and the game felt fresh while still feeling like League of Legends. Even most players who were skeptic of the changes at first came to enjoy them. But if you think Riot was done with big patches, you're greatly mistaken. On February 1st, 2013, Riot would release the patch that would start off the new ranked season. On that same patch, they would completely rework the ranked system used until then, the ELO rating system. The ELO rating system would be reworked into the new League system, which is the same system still used today. The biggest difference was that instead of playing for ELO, you are now playing for LP and promotions. While players immediately complained about how bad LP games were, which, to be fair, didn't really change, this completely blew up the ranked ladder, and people who never cared to play ranked in seasons 1 and 2 would suddenly become invested. People for the most part cared way less if someone you knew was 1200 ELO and you were on rank. On the other hand, it was often a different story when your Silver 4 friend was trash talking you, saying you would be stuck in Bronze forever and that you would never reach Silver. Around the same time, they would also launch the League of Legends Championship Series, also known as the LCS, which to many marks the true start of the League of Legends professional scene. It should come as no surprise that the LCS was an instant success. And on April 29th, Riot would add their most successful game mode of all time, All Random All Mid, also known as ARAM, which up until then could only be played in custom games as a for fun party game on the tutorial map. The problem with this was that people would often troll or AFK in these custom games, as there would be no punishment for leaving them. So again, Riot appealed to everyone. If you were a tryhard gamer, ranked was more appealing than before, and if you were a casual player, you could now enjoy ARAMs. It's also worth noting that in general, games were much faster than in Season 2. The meta was way more burst heavy. The burst heavy meta and faster games definitely were appealing to more people than the slow paced games in Seasons 1 and 2. Now remember, before all these changes that I just listed, League of Legends was already the most played game in the world. However, all these changes completely exploded the game to new heights. While Riot never officially published any numbers for 2013, it's estimated that the monthly active users went from 32 million in 2012 to around 70 million, which would be more than double the player base. This would be crazy if you consider that League of Legends was already the biggest game in 2012. However, nothing showed the growth of the game more than the Season 3 World Championship.
Farm going on. Reginald putting some pressure down, but Faker actually turning him down a lot of damage. Reginald goes aggressive, wins the ultimate, gonna get caught out. Faker gets him down. Both sides, Yellow Star with the Zenith blade, but they're still throwing on the ultimate. Trying to fake that one out, but here comes that Stand United. Cyanide as well comes into the fight, and they will be able to get the double. Very low. Looper is just getting crushed. A great ultimate coming in from Soaz.
Oh no! Passive is there to save him. Will he be able to escape? There is Stand United coming in. Stranglethorn's gonna knock down
Now Kane gonna be the target. Exhaust goes down, but it won't make a difference. Especially gonna try and chase down Baker here, but with Impact together, hold down. Will he have the finisher? Baker is still alive. Charm's gonna land onto him. Is he gonna be able to walk away? Baker is still running. There's another turn, and Expansion goes down. Get down. The Nexus is gonna fall here. Fnatic getting down to half. Fnatic coming off the spawn. They're gonna try and hold on to this one for a final time. It looks like they're doing a good job of it as well. Pushu falls down, and Fnatic.
Auto attack after auto attack. You see Agony's Embrace going in. That's a great strangleforce. Gonna knock him. Nobody actually from Ozone as they managed to get out. Now Moidal kick back into the fight. The rest of Gambit are untouched though. This is the second kill for Gambit. They now turn their focus onto him. This is gonna be a triple kill for Genji.
OMG. And Kole gets done again!
The max range charm, the lockup, the knockdown, the takedown. Bengi gets the kill there.
Sign going in!
Way too close. The exhaust is there, but it's not going to be enough. They are going to fall one after the other in the I think I can mentality. But I think I can. They really can.
SKT can! They're going 3 turns in a row and another kill!
I stopped at 4 and 5.
Dangerous move from him. They're shielded up by Lulu. There's White's actually coming in. Wild Growth goes down, going. He's getting obliterated. There's a 3-man crescendo coming in as well. Tame picks up a kill, but they're only going one way right now. San taking tons of damage there as he falls. They're still chasing here as well. Lovely. Can he get away from this one? Tumble comes down, and that's a triple kill for the Bay.
OMG going for the fight. They have the man advantage.
Oh, Lovely actually going very deep. Cole gonna go over towards Sammy. There's the stand United being used very early. Uzi is coming in from the backside. Surprise! Here comes the Bay. Kill for White. Sam's not gonna escape this one. They focus down Uzi. But look at him. He's still alive. He's still surviving. He stays alive. Ace!
Ruma newbie to the Lancey on this one. Tries to get Mazira. He may put himself in the water. No, White popped up by Sprinkle Thorn from around the side. SAT's got it. They finish it. They're going to surge. And he saves the first White. Oh, and Ruma saves the day. And not even White can believe it. White took both hands and put them into his face after that play. Because that could very well.
Remember in 2012? The Season 2 World Championship was the most watched esport event in history at the time. In 2013, well, the number of people tuning in quadrupled to 32 million. And the peak concurrent viewership went all the way up to 8.5 million from 1.1 million. In 1 year, League of Legends managed to not only maintain the status of the most played PC game in the world, but also continued growing to heights they probably could have never imagined. They did what a lot of other games failed to do: capitalize on their initial success. And they did so, big time. But it doesn't end there. Sustaining a successful game doesn't end in just a year. It's a never-ending process. Over the next years, League would continue to grow at an impressive rate, slowly becoming what it is today. League of Legends would reach 100 million monthly players 4 years later in 2017 and 150 million in 2021. While League would lose its #1 spot over time to games like Fortnite and Roblox, League still continues to stay among the top games and is definitely not dying. Over the past decade, Riot managed to not only keep their player base engaged, but to grow it to new heights, even outside the gaming sphere. League of Legends would have its own bands, most notable KDA, and even its own Netflix series, Arcane, which would go on and win several awards. League of Legends would quite literally become mainstream. Now, don't get me wrong, Riot is not perfect. Far from it. In fact, 2013 wasn't this perfect year free from flaws either. If you played on the EU West server during that time, you will know that the servers crash at least once a week, and Riot struggled big time to fix it. This ended up becoming kind of a meme in the League community over time. However, by early 2014, this was fixed, and the servers have been pretty stable ever since. If there is one thing we can take away from League of Legends' journey, it's this. The few mess-ups in 2013 didn't matter, since the content they delivered made up for it. The pros outweighed the cons. Overwatch 2 didn't see a massive drop in player base due to a few mess-ups. It fell because there was nothing or barely anything redeeming these mess-ups. We aren't looking to play the perfect game free from flaws. We just want to have fun. And Season 3 was extremely fun. At least for me, and a large part of the community back then. Enjoyment is also partly subjective. The durability patch 2 years ago showcases this pretty well. Some people really liked the update and enjoyed League's longer teamfights.
Like, is this not insane, guys? Do you see this? Like, this is actually how League of Legends used to be. They can't just Ooga Booga one-shot you.
While others hated it and immediately wanted Riot to revert it.
Oh, but everybody else is more durable. This feels terrible, by the way. Horrible.
However, there was one meta that would follow just a few years after 2013 that was so disliked by majority of the player base that Riot had to drop a patch that completely broke down roles again to the point where we had to start all over again.